Hello, hello, hello. I'm going to go ahead and get this started. Let's see.
The Law and Crime Network. I'm Linda Kenny Bodden, and I thank you for being with us as we kick off our coverage. We're following the arraignment of the suspect in the 1996 shooting death of rapper Tupac Shakur. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis will be arraigned in a Nevada court today. He was one of four suspects identified early on in this investigation and was described by authorities as the ringleader. Though he is not accused of being the actual gunman, Davis has admitted that he provided the weapon used in the drive-by shooting in prior interviews. He was arrested hours before prosecutors announced that a Nevada grand jury had indicted him on one count of murder with a deadly weapon. They also voted to add a sentencing enhancement to the murder charge for gang activity that could add up to 20 additional years. That is if he is convicted. Now, I'd like to bring in my guest, Richard Schoenstein, who is an incredible trial attorney, to talk about this case. Actually, you know what? Actually, even more important, our own Anjanette Levy has a look about, and a report for you, our viewers, about this. Let's go.
I'm Anjanette Levy, coming to you from the Las Vegas Strip at the spot where police found rapper Tupac Shakur shot on September 7th, 1996. Later this morning, the man accused of ordering the hit on Tupac, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, will enter a plea to a murder charge in court. Tupac Shakur's family and friends have waited more than 27 years for this day. Las Vegas Metro Police took Davis, a South Compton Crips gang leader, into custody last Friday after a months-long grand jury investigation. Police say Davis ordered the murder of Tupac in September 1996 after Tupac and Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight jumped Davis's nephew, Orlando Anderson, at the MGM Grand over an old beef.
Dwayne Davis began to devise a plan to obtain a firearm and retaliate against Suge Knight and Mr. Shakur for what occurred inside the hotel against Mr. Anderson.
Davis confessed in a statement years ago to giving Orlando Anderson the gun to shoot Tupac, but that statement could not be used against him in court because of an agreement with police. Orlando Anderson died in a shooting in 1998, so he cannot be prosecuted. But Davis wrote about providing the gun to kill Tupac in his self-published book, Compton Street Legend. He's also granted interviews to YouTube channels in which he spoke about the shooting of Tupac Shakur. Right now, Dwayne Davis is being held without bail. The judge could set a trial date for him after he enters a plea later today. Stay with Law and Crime for continuing coverage of the arrest of Dwayne Keefe D. Davis. In Las Vegas, I'm Anjanette Levy.
And again, as I mentioned too, I have a great trial attorney with me, Richard Schoenstein. Richard, at a hearing to enter a plea, do you expect Keefe Davis to say not guilty? I'm not going to enter a plea, or on the off chance, guilty, you got me?
Well, I think that last one is a very slim chance. I would expect him to enter a not guilty plea. I don't know why I would do anything else.
Yeah, so the hearing really isn't that important. It's just a matter of pro forma for intent to plea and set an attorney, see if he has one, I would imagine. But let me ask you something more importantly. This case, 1996, supposedly there's statements made, supposedly there's a proffer. Which is some kind of admission. Tell our viewers what a proffer is and whether or not a proffer would be admissible as an admission or a confession in a trial such as this in 2023.
All right. Well, the proffer, generally speaking, a proffer is something that a witness will tell the authorities when they're, investigating a crime. And I guess it came up in the context of some other crime that was being investigated.
Drug investigation, right.
And so the police will ordinarily make a deal that the information you give us, we won't use it against you for a different purpose. So if he made a proffer about having knowledge about the murder of Tupac, it wasn't related to the crime they were investigating, and that proffer couldn't be used against him.
Okay.
That statement to those police officers. But if he later gave the same information to somebody else, then he would be subject to having that used.
Well, let me just interrupt you for a second, because there's a piece of information you don't know and our viewers don't know. The hearing that was supposed to occur today to enter a plea has been continued to October 19th. Now, Richard, that usually happens because there's no attorney assigned. He wants to get a private counsel, or there's some other, I won't say glitch, but there's some other reason, technical reason.
Yeah, well, that explains why it was so short.
It was shorter than my introduction.
Court hearings get adjourned all the time. Right. I have a line of clients who are frustrated by adjourned court hearings or other dates that we set. So that can happen for any number of reasons, including the defendant didn't have counsel or wasn't ready, or counsel wasn't ready, or somebody didn't have enough. So it's put off a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and he's without bail, so he's not going to get bail, right?
I wouldn't think so. Not in
an attempted murder case. Not in a murder case. But let's go to what you talked about. Supposedly this proffer then that was given, to the police and the drug dealer says, I have some information. Turned out to be information about Tupac Shakur. They were investigating Biggie Smalls, also an unsolved homicide, though many people think they know who did it. When you have the proffer, there was a belief, according to authorities, that they said in a presser that they believed that Keefe D thought he had immunity, that he couldn't be prosecuted prosecuted anything related to Tupac Shakur. Then he gave statements in a book, supposedly. Why would those statements be admissible if they're not under oath and we don't actually know who actually wrote them and whether or not they were the actual statements that Keefe D made?
All right, let's break that down a little bit. So
that's a lot.
The first question is, does the proffer immunize him in statements he later makes in a book? And the answer to that is probably no, because you make a proffer to police for the purposes of this case, and that is protected. But if you go give the same information to somebody else in some other context, it can be used against you. So now let's move to statements in a book. Can statements in a book be used against him? Probably. It's not going to be hearsay. It's going to fall within multiple exceptions to the hearsay rule. It's an admission against interest.
Which makes it reliable.
That's right. That's right. That is the feeling about it. That's why we keep out hearsay, because it's not me reporting what you said is not necessarily reliable unless it's something you said against your own interest. Then it's more reliable.
Well, let's go to the third thing, though. When I was reading this and prepping for this morning, and knowing that you were going to be on and could answer all of my questions,
yeah,
right?
I know about that.
Okay.
We'll try.
All right. So let's assume the statement is, I gave a gun to my nephew in the backseat of the car, but my nephew was the one who actually shot Tupac. Okay. And everybody in that car is dead. The other three people are dead, all but Keefe D. But what was his intent in giving the gun? If he just says, I gave a gun, or does he have to say, I gave a gun because I wanted my nephew, I ordered him to shoot? And if no one's there to say he ordered him to shoot, how does the state prove intent?
Yeah, well, the state still has to build a case. So I assume they're going to show motive by virtue of the prior dispute between this group and Tupac's group.
Would you explain what that was?
I don't know. I see you're getting more in the weeds than I am.
Okay.
My understanding of this and my recollection from almost 30 years ago is that they had some sort of altercation. Right. They weren't necessarily on friendly terms to begin with. There's some sort of altercation. So the theory is that Davis essentially ordered that Tupac would be killed. And they got in a car. The allegation in the indictment is that he procured the gun. And they were in the car and they drove up and he handed it to some guy in the backseat who then shot, one car to the other. So if the statement is just, I handed him the gun, that doesn't prove the rest of the case.
Right.
It doesn't prove the intent. It doesn't prove he knew the guy was going to use a gun to commit a murder. Maybe he's going to say or imply, not going to say because don't suspect he'll testify, but We'll see. That's down the road a while. Maybe he'll imply that they just had a gun for protection, as
That's what I was asking you about. Yeah. So also, I guess the prosecution says these were two separate gangs, factions. But how do you prove that that's a motive for an enhancement, even if it's true and there's some question about whether it's true?
Well, remember, not only are they going to try to prove there's gang activity as part of the motive theory, but they have a gang activity enhancement alleged on the murder itself, which I think elevates the degree of the murder charge. So gang activity is very much going to be part of this prosecution, as far as I can tell. And that makes it a lot more to prove, right? Now they don't just have to prove that there's a guy in a car with a gun who hands the gun to another guy who kills somebody. Right. They have to prove this whole web of gang activity, which is and it's almost 30 years old.
Right.
It's not like gang activity from last week. It's 1996. The iPhone hadn't been invented.
Right. How about we forget about that? And I also want to talk to you a little bit later on about Suge Knight. But in the meantime, I'd like you to listen with our viewers to a press conference, not the one this morning. Actually, there's a live presser right now. Let's go.
So that's what occurred today in court. Nothing will occur in the next couple of weeks until the next court appearance when his lawyer appears. Mr. Davis is being held on no bail. That no bail status will continue at least until his next court appearance. We will continue to ask for a no bail setting because we believe under Nevada law and the evidence in this case that the proof is evident and the presumption is great that he will be convicted of first-degree murder, and that allows us to ask for a no bail setting. I'll take some questions now.
Steve, what does it mean after so many months of work from your office to see him in court today?
Well, he's no different than any other defendant. I mean, we had a feeling this day was coming in the recent history based upon some of the events that have occurred in the last few years and few months. I like to see the person in person because on these cases, it's usually me that makes the ultimate decision on how to proceed. So I like to look at a person who's being charged with a crime in such a high-profile case. I like to look at their mannerisms. I like to look at their demeanor. I like to listen to them and kind of get a feel for their attitude.
Steve, can you say if he's been cooperating with investigators, if he's talked at all?
I understand that the day of his arrest, they were speaking with him, but I don't have anything further to say other than that.
If there
any coordination with LA about Victoria's CIG case?
I'm not going to comment on anything involving that other matter.
So we Preston, CBS News. This is such a high-profile case, 27 years in the making. Can you talk about how that could impact the legal process moving forward?
Well, it's a cold case. It's been lingering for 27 years, but I felt there was sufficient legally admissible evidence to move forward. That's why we presented it to a grand jury. The grand jury agreed that there was probable cause to return an indictment. But this case is like no other case. In a court of law, we have to present sufficient legal evidence to hopefully prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Any case that's 27 years old sometimes presents some challenges, but we feel very confident that the criminal justice system will work in this case.
Mr. Wilson,
Is there any reason to fear for
why did it
safety
take
with
so
a
long?
gang affiliation?
Who's safety?
Davis's safety while in custody?
I don't know. I don't know anything about his safety and his contacts or his relationships with people from 27 years ago. I don't have any information regarding that.
Steve, I spoke to Tupac Shakur's brother yesterday. He says he feels that this case wouldn't have gone without breakthrough for 27 years if Tupac had been a white man. Would this have been solved more quickly if Tupac had been white?
We don't look at the color of a person's skin. We have a number of cold cases that excellent detectives work on every single day. And whether the person is white, black, red, blue, or green, we move based upon evidence and what we can present in a court of law.
Steve, a lot of people have said, why did this take so long, especially in the last few years? Mr. Davis was very vocal about his involvement. Is there a simple answer to that question?
The simple answer is that this is an important case. We wanted to make sure we get it right. We wanted to make sure we had legally admissible evidence. We wanted to make sure that we felt comfortable that we had sufficient legal evidence. You know, if you're going to charge a person with murder, he has a right to believe that the system would only bring charges if there was sufficient legal evidence. So we waited until the point in time when we had that degree of evidence to move forward.
So one of the complaints from the PPD in recent years is that he has said that he has terminal cancer, he has cancer, he's very unwell. Is that playing any role in this criminal procedure?
I've heard the same comments as well, some of the statements he's made to the media. I don't know his current medical condition. I'm not going to speak to whether he's still suffering from cancer or not.
Do you think that the trial perhaps will be happening quicker because of the high profile of it, or when do you anticipate the trial likely?
Well, in a couple of weeks, when he's formally arraigned, he has a right to invoke the Speedy Trial Act, which means setting a trial within 60 days, or he can waive that right to a speedy trial, and then the trial would be set off into next year. We have to wait to see at the arraignment what he chooses to do. Anybody else? We're good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes,
Okay, so you just heard the DA from Clark County, Steve Wolfson, saying they are confident they will get a conviction, although he wasn't too sure, Richard Schoenstein, about some of the information from 27 years ago. Now, tell us how that may inure to the benefit of the defendant here, Keefe D.
All right. So
as he's known, Mr. Davis.
Mr. Davis, let's just start with a general proposition. And you know this as well as anybody because you worked on these cases and still do. No prosecution gets better with age, right? Age is the enemy of a prosecution. Evidence gets stale, people's memories fade, witnesses die or disappear. And think about this. Davis was supposedly in the car with 3 other people. They are all dead. Right? There's no other testimony left from anybody in that car. Now, they may have not testified anyway. I don't know the state of the forensics, but obviously we didn't have the same level of forensics in 1996 that we have in 2023. Right. I said before, we watch these cases on this channel. There's always evidence. Your cell phone has been pinging off of towers, right, and everybody knows exactly where you are.
And as you said, these little spies weren't even invented yet.
Right. So we're not going to have that kind of testimony to know the whereabouts for sure. I don't know what kind of monitoring that the vehicles used probably didn't have that kind of monitoring. So it's just not, it's back in time to a time when we didn't have the same technology we have today. So it will be a daunting task to put on some of those things that we're used to seeing in the trials that you and I watch.
And I'm still going to talk to you when we have time about Suge Knight, who was supposedly an eyewitness who says he's not going to testify, to your point. Anyhow, we're going to take a quick break here at the Law and Crime Network. More on whether or not the prosecutors, the DA in Clark County, Nevada, have solved the Tupac Shakur case, and whether or not Keefe D. Davis, Mr. Davis, who has been arrested for it, will enter a plea of guilty when we come back on October 19th. Actually, what's happened is he has a lawyer who couldn't be here today on this short notice, and that's why this has been adjourned for several weeks. Stay with us here. We're the Law and Crime Network.
Yeah, Ali, I think, yeah, it was an eye for an eye for Biggie. I truly believe that because I've been reading up on some of this. It's crazy. And Davis, he wrote that book and all kinds of shit. How can you just let something go when someone's admitted to murder? He's admitted to that for years. And he even told, that he gave the gun to so-and-so and whoever shot was in the back seat and this and that. And in a murder case, it's not like some shoplifting or some shit, I'm just glad we're getting some justice for Pac, and I hope we get it for Biggie. And I have a feeling a lot more is going to come out in this. What are you doing, Winnie Beanie? My dogs are playing. That's true, Allie. I agree. I wonder, though, I want to see what they got to get him now. You know what I mean? Somebody snitching. You know what I'm saying? Something. I can't wait to see this all play out. Right. Yes, Allie. Bingo. I cannot wait to see all this play out. So we've been waiting 27 years for this, and this case holds a very special spot in my heart. And yep. Right, Allie. Yes, I want to know. Yeah, I want to know what's that key they got now. What did they get that could seal this deal? This is going to be interesting, and I will be covering this to the end. And because this is, I love music. I love Tupac, and yeah, this is my kind of thing. Fuck true crime, which is kind of true crime, but this is more the music industry, and I'm interested in this more than true crime. Fuck true crime. Easy, girls. But Allie, wouldn't they have, if they had that, wouldn't something happened years ago, way before now? You know what I mean? There's something solid that they got on this. I don't know. It could be a fingerprint or something, you know, but I think they would have had that years ago.
Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Linda Kenny Bodden. We are discussing the amazing arrest of somebody who is now, the police say, a suspect, not just a suspect. They claim that he is the actual giving the order kind of guy, the guy who said, you shoot Tupac Shakur, and that the case may finally be solved after 27 years. And the person they have arrested, Richard Schoenstein, is Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, who was in a car with 3 other people there. The 3 people are dead, but the prosecutors allege that he had the gun and he handed it to his nephew in the back seat and ordered him to shoot Tupac Shakur. Now, before we went to break, we were talking about the problems of prosecuting somebody after this period of time. And every witness in the back of the car is dead, including the alleged shooter, the alleged gun person. Okay. But there was a witness in another car, supposedly Suge Knight. Suge Knight has said publicly he's not going to testify in this case should he be subpoenaed by the prosecutors. Now, would Suge Knight have immunity under the Fifth Amendment? In other words, could he assert his immunity? Could he assert the Fifth Amendment and not testify?
I think so. I mean, I'd have to think about that a little more, but I don't see why he couldn't. You know, he is supposedly connected to the altercation that precedes this shooting, right? I guess that happened at a Mike Tyson fight, of all things, right, between the two groups. And he's in the car.
For those who don't know, Mike Tyson was a world champion boxer. He also appeared in some funny movies afterwards and had his own show on Broadway, but that's
So there's a fight at the Tyson. There's a fight at the Tyson fight, and then Suge Knight is in the car with Tupac when he is killed, and it's always been speculated that he knew who did it. 1, because he was part of the altercation, and 2, because he was in the car. Suge Knight is serving, as I understand it, a 28-year prison sentence right now. I'm sure is not interested in getting in any further trouble and probably wants no part of this trial whatsoever.
And he's not going to, if he's in serving a sentence, he's not going to become, shall we say, as we used to call it, now it's called an incentivized informant, but a snitch against somebody.
That seems very unlikely, especially since if he knows who did it, it's a secret that he's been keeping secret for 27 years. Mm-hmm. So it makes no sense that he would suddenly violate that and violate, you know, the gang credo or whatever it is and give up the information now. So one option is he says, I'm taking the Fifth. I won't implicate myself. I'm not going to testify about the events that day. That would probably hold. And the second option is I imagine he could just say, I don't know who shot him.
Right.
There was a car next to us and he was shot. I wasn't concerning myself with identifying the shooter. I was concerning myself with staying alive.
Or the what we used to call a general named Ollie North, I don't remember defense also, right? So you have 3 options there. But no, so getting back to this, is the prosecution then just planning to use statements against Dwayne Davis, statements that he made? Or do you think that perhaps they have other informants in some way?
I don't know if they have other informants. That's a possibility. I don't know the strength of their evidence that these 2 gangs were at each other. I don't know what they have in terms of witnesses to the altercation at the Mike Tyson fight, but presumably we're going to hear about all of that because it's the predicate for the shooting. Presumably we're going to hear whatever evidence they have about this gun when it was purchased, where it came from? I don't know if they know that.
Well, let me just throw a little fact in there that our viewers probably also know. You know, there was a search warrant executed, right, during the course of this grand jury investigation. And now we have an indictment. Do you think perhaps they had some evidence relating to the gun or the cartridges that Tupac Shakur was shot with in the home or in an area that Dwayne Keefe D. Davis lived in?
It's possible. I don't know. I would think the statements alone would be enough to get him indicted, but it's probably not enough to get him convicted, right? To your point, there's some equivocation in the statements as to exactly what they mean. He doesn't, I doubt he said, I gave him a gun and ordered him to kill Tupac. I mean, that doesn't seem like something he would.
Well, let me put that in too. If he had said that, I would think that there'd be the rival. If this was a gang rival, and say, okay, we're going to go and kill you if you ordered the hit. Because I don't even know the circumstances of how the other three people in the car died. I haven't looked into that. Have you?
Well, I believe it's not connected to that incident, right? I think they died later, but I don't know the circumstances
surrounding it. Yeah. So it's a really interesting case. But what I want to now is play the issue, and I want to play when we heard that there was an arrest in the Tupac Shakur case by the state. Why don't we listen?
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Kevin McMahill. I'm the sheriff of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. 27 years. 27 years. For 27 years, the family of Tupac Shakur has been waiting for justice. We are here today to announce the arrest of 60-year-old Dwayne Keith Davis, aka Keefy D, for the murder of Tupac Shakur. Davis was arrested this morning by my LVMPD criminal apprehension team, and this investigation started on the night of September 7th, 1996. It is far from over.
And my goal here today is to walk you through our investigation and what led us to the indictment of Dwayne Davis, also known as Keefy D, for the murder of Tupac Shakur. This case has been reviewed by our homicide team and homicide detectives for over 2.5 decades. And ultimately, our persistence in this investigation has paid off. Let me walk you through a timeline of events that as we know them right now. Prior to September 7th of 1996, as we all know, Tupac Shakur was an artist who was signed with Death Row Records. And that Death Row Records and its CEO, Marion Suge Knight, were closely affiliated with the Mob Piru criminal street gangs, and that they had an ongoing feud with the Southside Compton Crips. Dwayne Davis was the leader and shot caller of the Southside Compton Crips. And both of these gangs operated out of the Southern California area of Compton. On the night of September 7th of 1996, Tupac Shakur, along with Suge Knight, and members of their entourage, which include members of Mob Piru, came to Vegas to attend the Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. Members of the Southside Compton Crips, which included Dwayne Davis, along with his nephew, Orlando Anderson, were also in attendance at the same event. As both were leaving the fight, members of Death Row Records spotted Orlando Anderson near an elevator bank inside the MGM. And at that time, they began to kick and punch him near that elevator bank. I will now show you hotel security footage, as many of you have already seen, related to this incident. And on this incident, you will see Tupac Shakur, who's wearing a shiny satiny shirt, along with Marion Suge Knight, who's a large man in a brown suit, punching and kicking Orlando Anderson. Following this incident, you'll see hotel security intervene, and then they will leave the area of the fight.
A Clark County grand jury has indicted Dwayne Keith Davis with 1 count of open murder with use of a deadly weapon with a gang enhancement. Davis will appear in court in the next few days or so for a hearing to determine his custody status and to set a jury trial date. This grand jury has been receiving evidence for months and has determined there is sufficient evidence to justify the filing of this criminal indictment. I've assigned two of my top prosecutors, Mark DiGiacomo and Banu Palal, to prosecute this case. I know a lot of people have been watching and waiting for this day. Tupac Shakur is a music legend, and for a long time, this community and worldwide have been wanting justice for Tupac. Today, we are taking that first step.
And you just heard how and what led to the history of Dwayne Keefe D. Davis getting arrested. But right now, our own Anjanette Levy from the Law and Crime Network was in that courtroom when the supposed arraignment didn't occur, but there was a court proceeding. Anjanette, tell us everything you saw, everything about what happened, why it was put off. And I know that you have a guest with you also to discuss this. Welcome.
Well, Michael Troiano is a defense attorney here in Las Vegas. He is with me. And Michael, thanks so much for joining me. Linda, first off, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis walked into that courtroom. He has an attorney, but his attorney, Edie Fall, cannot be here today. So this hearing was continued for 2 weeks until October 19th. So Keefe D. did not enter a plea. He will continue to be held without bail at the Clark County Jail. And so really nothing of consequence happened today. We were expecting him to enter a plea, but obviously he doesn't have counsel with him, but he has retained counsel. There was a woman who was here in support of him. There was also a rapper from Death Row Records in the courtroom. More media than anybody else, if you can imagine that. That's often what happens in these cases. A lot of international press here to cover this event. Michael, are you surprised at all by what happened today, given the fact that Keefe D. Dwayne Davis does not have an attorney or did not have an attorney with him in court?
No, I'm not surprised. I mean, this case has been going on for a little bit over 30 years now, and the fact that his attorney is out of California, had to be here on short notice, makes sense. And he's probably going to have to find local counsel as well so that he could pro hoc vice in and be able to practice here in front of the Clark County courts.
This case has been going on now, as you mentioned, for almost 3 decades. So a lot of people didn't think this day would actually come, even though a lot of people knew what presumably happened that night. Keefe D. obviously innocent until proven guilty. What was the reaction in the legal community here?
Well, once his home was raided, several months ago, it was expected, at least in the local criminal defense community. I mean, they typically aren't going to go in and raid a home, especially with a case with this much history, without expecting to find something, at least from the law enforcement perspective.
What do you expect to happen next at that October 19th hearing? Obviously, that will be an arraignment. He should enter a plea, but do you expect anything else to happen?
I would imagine within the next 2 weeks, he's going to find local counsel so that his California attorney could pro hoc vice in, which will allow him to practice in front of the Nevada State Bar for these limited purposes. And then they'll probably schedule a bail hearing where his attorneys will probably file a lengthy written bail motion, and the state will reply with an opposition, and then there will likely be a hearing where the main detective will testify at the bail hearing. So it'll almost be a preview to the trial in a sense.
DA Steve Wolfson said that he continues to be held without bail, and they will continue to ask that Keefe D. be held without bail. Do you think there's any chance he gets any type of bond?
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, it's very difficult to get bond in a murder case, especially here in Clark County, because it's one of the only crimes where the state has the ability to request that, essentially, with no other open cases and convoluted issues like that. But the fact that the case is so old, and apparently he hasn't been in any sort of trouble in many recent years, probably leads to a puncher's chance. But I would imagine that he's going to be held no bail if I had to bet on it.
Yeah, I would think so too. I mean, it's a huge case. Is there any talk in the legal community about this? What's kind of the word on the ground, if you would, or the word around the courthouse among lawyers?
We all want to know who he's going to hire. Maybe me. Who knows?
Okay, but I mean, is there talk about this might be a tough case to prosecute only because he could say, I was just blowing smoke. It was a bunch of bluster, since his proffer from, the mid-2000s cannot be used against him, the proffer in which he laid out for investigators what happened.
Yeah, a book is a book, and a book can be interpreted as fantasy, just like a rap lyric can be interpreted as fantasy. And going back all these decades, they don't have the sophistication that they do now with GPS monitoring, but it seems very likely that they're going to at least be able to put him in Las Vegas that evening. What happens after that is going to be anybody's guess until discovery starts.
Because everybody else that was in the vehicle that night, the white Cadillac, the 3 other people are dead. Michael, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, and I'll see you later in a little bit. Okay, have a good one in court. Okay, so Linda, we expected maybe some fans to show up today, and we did have some fans show up for court, fans of Tupac Shakur's, and I'm waiting to kind of get them to come over here. They've been in high demand. Mario and Katina Scott are right over here, and we have been waiting to speak with them. Mario, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Mario, why did you feel the need to come to court today?
Well, other than being family, we just had to be here and see what was going on with the case, because it's been so long and so overwhelming. We just wanted to be present,
You say your family. Explain that to me.
Yes, ma'am. My cousin. He's my blood cousin.
Tupac?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so how old were you when Tupac died?
9.
Oh my gosh, so you were just a little kid, right? What did Tupac Shakur, he was somebody that came from a somewhat rough background.
Yes, ma'am.
And, that's hard. It's hard to get out of that. And he was able to get out of that and make something of himself. What did that mean to your family?
It was, he gave so much of our family member courage and, just the outlaw spirit and, never to give up and never to stop, because he never stopped. He was a genius before his time. Yes, ma'am.
You were a child.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you looked up to him. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so much. I always heard his music, and his mom would tell us about, all the things that he did going to school and all that. But, I grew up with the memories more than, having the memories myself, because I was so young.
And this is your wife, Katina.
Yes, ma'am.
Katina, you came obviously with your husband today. What was it like in the courtroom seeing Keefe D in cuffs in a courtroom charged with the murder after all of these years?
It was an odd feeling. I experienced a lot of emotions, particularly being that he's always been so close. That's not even someone that I expected or suspected at all to be a suspect. So for him to be in custody and the suspect, and to even have a suspect after all of this time, just a lot of excitement, anxiety, anticipation, just trying to see how this is all going to work out, because all of this is just so surprising.
Mario, did you think there would ever be an arrest? The word was out that Keefe D was giving interviews on different YouTube channels. He had written this book. Did you ever think anything would happen?
Never, no ma'am. Never. It's been so long, more than half of my life. So, we never thought it would be, justice. Been so long.
Were you surprised on Friday or even back in July when they raided Keefe D's house?
Most definitely. Yes, ma'am. The whole family was surprised, and we were so happy and elated and so emotional. It was just like it happened, all over again. Yes, ma'am. We was definitely surprised.
How's the rest of the family doing? He has a brother, older brother, Mopreme. I saw his father on a YouTube channel speaking about some things, and I don't know exactly how old that interview was, but the family had to have been frustrated over the years.
So frustrated, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, because it's like, it happened right on the strip, so for it to be hardly any evidence, or they didn't have anyone in custody for years, it was just, they was not trying to bring justice for Tupac. So to finally get justice, it feels great.
I talked to one of the first officers who was on the scene and found Tupac shot, and Suge Knight was shot as well. And he said that night, nobody saw anything, nobody was talking, people in the entourage, things like that. What would you say to people about that whole, don't talk, that whole no snitching kind of culture that exists? Maybe it was more hardcore back then, but what would you say to people who have information about homicides and are fearful to talk and tell what they know?
I would say if you have any information on homicides, you would want to treat people how you would want to be treated if it was you in a situation that got murdered. If you think about it, you would want people to come forward and speak on the behalf of the dead, individual that's passed away. So don't hold back information. Valuable information that on a murder case is super valuable. It's not like a death case or something, I'm just saying.
Maybe if people had cooperated, this wouldn't have taken 27 years.
Yes, ma'am. I doubt it. Yes, ma'am. It was a lot of cover-ups, but they finally got, justice.
Mario and Katina, if you could just stay put for a second, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Will you be back here for the October 19th hearing? Okay.
Right now.
Okay. I'll just stay put there for a second if you would. So thank you so much for talking with us. Okay. So Linda, there you heard it from Mario Scott. He is a cousin of Tupac Shakur, was 9 years old when his cousin was shot to death on the Las Vegas Strip. And so they are here to support the prosecution, to show up for Tupac Shakur and the rest of the family, and they plan to see this through.
Amazing, Anjanette. Sometimes justice takes a long time. Thank you so very much for that reporting. Just fabulous. So Rich Schoenstein is still with me here in the studio. Rich, the Las Vegas attorney, Mr. Toronto, that interviewed, said basically the same things we said, that additionally you have the issue of the time. You don't know what the statements mean. You don't know if the statements are admissible. And let me just tell you that KVD first spoke about his involvement in the shooting, I'm advised, with the Los Angeles Police Department for that immunity deal. It was for a PCP ring case. His confession was later reported in a 2011 book called Murder Rap by Craig Kading, who was a former detective on the case. Does that create any issues in having the evidence?
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Because if he had immunity with the police and then someone from the police published the statement, that's much different. We were talking before as if Davis himself made subsequent statements and they wouldn't have the immunity that was afforded to his proffer. But it creates a very interesting issue if the information came out in the leak. I wouldn't think that could be used against him, frankly.
Well, that is really interesting. So the argument would be you have no right to bring this prosecution. So if there was evidence related that they got evidence for the search warrant that was reported several months ago, because of this leak, is there something called the fruits of the poisonous tree? Would the evidence be suppressed? Do you think there's going to be a lot of suppression motions here?
Oh, yeah, there could be. I mean, you're exactly right with fruits of the poisonous tree. That's when you take something that you're not supposed to have and then you use it to get other evidence. And as a general matter, and I'm only going to speak in generalities
yes,
here,
because we don't know
the
specifics.
That is a no-no. So I do think that adds a lot of intrigue to this if that's the sequence that played out.
And so do we know whether or not the police have the right person? Has the murder of Tupac Shakur actually been solved? Well, on October 19th, we'll hear from the person who was charged. He will enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. His attorney will be there, and that is, as you know, Mr. Davis, who we've been talking about all morning. Stay with us. We are the Law and Crime Network. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. As you know, the murder of Tupac Shakur has not been solved for 27 years. A major case on the plate of the police in Nevada. And we also know that the other day there was an arrest made. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis is charged with handing the gun to his nephew and ordering the shooting of Tupac, according to the police in Nevada. Well, this morning, when the arraignment was supposed to happen but didn't because the attorney for Keefe D. couldn't be there, District Attorney from Clark County, Steve Wolfson, he's the head DA. He spoke to us all and told us the history of the case, what happened, and what he expects to prove to get a conviction. Let's listen.
So good morning, I'm Steve Wolfson. I'm the Las Vegas Clark County District Attorney. This morning, Dwayne Keefe Davis made his first court appearance here in Las Vegas pursuant to the indictment, which was returned last week, charging Mr. Davis with open murder with use of a deadly weapon with the gang enhancement. I want to say first off that Mr. Davis enjoys, like any other person in this country charged with a crime, the presumption of innocence. Today, he is presumed innocent until a court proceeding, a criminal justice system, proves his guilt. Today was the scheduled arraignment, but he can't be arraigned until he has a lawyer. Mr. Davis announced that he has retained a lawyer. I believe his name is Edie, spelled E-D-I, Fall, F-A-L-L, who is a lawyer out of California, is my understanding. Lawyer Fall couldn't be here today, so Mr. Davis asked for a 2-week continuance. That's why the judge put the case over, I believe, until October 19th for his arraignment. That is when he will formally enter a plea of not guilty, I believe, and at that point, the judge will set a date for jury trial. So that's what occurred today in court. Nothing will occur in the next couple of weeks until the next court appearance when his lawyer appears. Mr. Davis is being held on no bail. That no bail status will continue at least until his next court appearance. We will continue to ask for a no bail setting because we believe under Nevada law and the evidence in this case that the proof is evident and the presumption is great that he will be convicted of first-degree murder, and that allows us to ask for a no bail setting.
So there you heard it direct from the head DA, the Clark County District Attorney, Steve Wolfson. Richard Schoenstein. First, he announces that there is a presumption of innocence. We all know that Mr. Davis is presumed innocent right now. But he says that the evidence is so great, he expects that there will be no bail here because this is a first-degree murder charge that is being charged, and that he expects to prove the case. Do you agree with him or not?
I agree that there's probably not going to be any bail. There is, as one of the people we had on a little while ago said, there's a fighter's chance at bail because it's such an old case and there's no recent criminal activity alleged by the defendant. But it's a murder case, and it's a high-profile murder case, and it's alleged to have gang implications. And those are all things that would lead to not having bail. So I wouldn't expect him to be out before the trial.
And at the time Tupac was murdered, Biggie Smalls was also murdered on the South case. Biggie Smalls, who just influenced everybody, including Lin Miranda, who wrote Hamilton here on Broadway. Just a major person. Tupac, also major, pulled himself out of the depths and came to be an icon, as you just heard from his blood relative who was there. Talk to me about this.
Well, it's so tragic. I mean, I'm not going to fool anyone into believing this is my kind of music, but these guys were innovators. They pulled themselves up out of bad situations and willed themselves into fame with music that people still listen to this day. And they had it all, and they die under these ridiculous, tragic circumstances. So Tupac goes to the Mike Tyson fight. Do you know how long that fight lasted? 1 minute and 49 seconds. It was a knockout in the first round. It was a ridiculous fight from that period where Tyson was just defeating everybody quickly and easily. They get into an altercation after the fight, and he's killed by somebody in a car shortly thereafter. And it's such a waste of talent and spirit and innovation that could have been around, 30 years later.
And it appears to still be going on today. Richard, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. We have been talking about the Tupac Shakur murder and the arrest that's been made 27 years later here at the Law and Crime Network. Stay with us. When we come back, we'll discuss that and all the other cases we have on the docket here. I'm Linda Kenny Bodden. You're listening to Law and Crime.
Again, off we go, roughly about 45 miles an hour. Again, driving on surface streets.
All right, that's about it. I think I'm going to end this. And that's about it. Thank you all for coming. I'll keep updates on this and stuff. I might go live later because I got some stuff I want to talk about it with Tupac and stuff. So y'all have a great day. Love you all. Bye.